Right, let's turn our attention to the papers. Joining me in the studio, Bill Bowkett, political commentator at Reaction, but also part of Young Voices. Bill, good morning to you.
Very good morning, James.
Right, okay, so the Sun leads on this. Petrol hits £2 a litre, airports still in chaos, and a 3-day rail strike. Look, it slightly depends on how this impacts you. If you've got a business, or you're trying to fill your car, that's one expense. But if you're thinking about whether or not you should book a holiday, I mean, you just come back from your travels.
Yes.
Were you hit by any travel chaos, or was it all newspaper stories, and in fact your experience was kind of better?
Do you know what it is? I think coming out of the UK, it was chaotic. I think my parents, when they had to go through check luggage, they waited over 2.5 hours, to the point where the tannoy had to say, anyone actually on this flight to Barcelona, please skip the queue and come directly through. But actually coming back to UK, it was completely fine. E-passport took 2 minutes, got my luggage straight away. But then again, that was during the Jubilee celebrations, when everyone was, you know, at the Mall watching, you know, that magnificent festival that was. So maybe it's not the most representative anecdote.
I mean, no, but I guess it is good news to an extent that, you know, sometimes things work. I mean, my last experience back to the UK, the French airport was shocking. And actually, the UK airports were beginning to, I mean, some very big queues, but actually they were moving through quite fast. So, you know, I guess, you know, we're just going to have to get used to different kinds of travel chaos. The Times. Cut tax if you want to survive, the Prime Minister's urged. Boris Johnson is safe for now. There are a lot of discussions about who still wants him out, and they're still making a lot of noise. The Daily Mail having a right old go at every kind of liberal left commentator, whatever. I mean, my view is he's won the vote. There are lots of things that he's done wrong. Now is the chance. You've got a year. Sort it out. I don't care what happens in any by-elections or whatever else. It's not a measure. You've got a year, Boris. Do what you need to do. Show us what you've got. And if you haven't got it, then by all means, put your letters in, get him out if he's not going to do what we need him to do. But my view would be, I want action. I want action against the unions. I want action on tax. I want action on the greenwash. I want action on our economy. Channel your inner Margaret. Get on with it. Stop channeling your inner Heath or your inner Tony.
James for Prime Minister, people. James for PM.
Well, I just think that there are so many people up and down this country working hard, trying to do the right thing, trying to make ends meet, and that we know it's difficult. We can all tighten our belts for stuff that is out of our control. But if it's in our control, and if it's in our government's control, and they can organise it and do it, get on with it. No,
completely. And I think the excuses have gone. I mean, you know, the government had to face the coronavirus pandemic and the war in Ukraine, but now is the actual time for action. I feel like Boris Johnson has had so many opportunities to win not only, you know, his base, but to maintain that support that he garnered back in 2019.
Is this last chance saloon?
It really is. I mean, we've got sure, by-elections are coming up. You've also got the Privileges Committee investigation, where it could decide that the Prime Minister had indeed you know, been held in contempt of Parliament, and therefore,
you see, both of those things,
as well.
Let them carry on. I don't want that to be a distraction, because this is the time at which, and I think you're right, you know, this is the last chance saloon next to the last chance saloon. It's like, Boris, you have to act now. It's too late if you don't. You've got to reduce tax. You've got to sort out the queues at the NHS. You've got to sort out some of our infrastructure problems, and you've got to sort out the longer-term issues that we're going to face in education, and indeed in government, if you don't put the right resources in the right place. Get on with it, as the Wendy would say. Wendy's my mother. She gives 3 words of advice to deal with any particular problem that is just lingering. Do it now. And if I was a mantra, I would say to government, do it now. Get Rishi back out again to come and do some more measures. Simplify the tax system. Help small businesses.
National insurance.
Get rid of all of that stuff. Get rid if it's not necessary, and explain to people what's coming down the pipes in terms of what you can do, government, and what you can't do, so that we We manage expectations.
I agree. And the problem here is that, as we saw with the Times front page and also in the Express, with potential measures, be that business rates, cutting council tax, which are proven election winners, Rishi Sunak, the Treasury, say that probably won't come until November. That's way too long, given the fact that inflation's going to be hitting 10% by the end of the year, or maybe over 10% of the Bank of England are forecasting. Living standards aren't going to improve, and the Tories' election prospects are doomed at this rate.
And at that stretch, then Rishi is not taking the Wendy's advice. Do it now. The Daily Express, as you say, fighting back Boris's tax blitz to silence rebels. Get on with it. Daily Star. Saturday night thunder fever, apparently. We got a double whammy of storms and pollen. Meanwhile, The Guardian doesn't want to talk about the cost of living crisis. They'd much rather talk about trying to get rid of Boris Johnson and other things. The I newspaper showing their true colours. Johnson faces Tory rebel war of attrition. It's like, bore off, move on. Daily Telegraph, Johnson urged to make Hunt the Chancellor. What do you make of that?
That's just berserk, isn't it? He's yesterday's man. I mean, sure, he might be popular, per se, among voters and Tory MPs, but come on, this is the man who raided capital budgets when he was Health Secretary. The most strong pro-lockdown backbencher you can imagine, which caused huge destruction.
Loves a bit of Europe.
And also, and admitted his failings led to, A&E delays. So if we can't trust him with our health service, how can we trust him with the economy?
The Mirror says, can't someone sort this out? There's the queues at the airports. The Metro talks about total rail shutdown. They talk about those rail strikes. Even the Financial Times talks about summer of misery looms as airports face staff squeeze and rail union strike. But then also the cost of petrol taking there. So, there we go. Those are the stories on the front pages. We'll turn our attention to the innards with Bill in just a few moments' time here on TalkTV. Going through the papers with Bill Bowkett, he's political commentator at Reaction, also at Young Voices. Bill, let's turn to the stories that you've picked out this morning. The age of Netflix. Wow. So the NHS is more like a blockbuster, apparently. Who's been talking and what are they saying?
So this was odd because in yesterday's briefing in Westminster, when referring to this review of the NHS by General Sir Gordon Messenger into the state of our health service, Sajid Javid supposedly made this comparison where in the age of Netflix, the NHS is more like a blockbuster. Which just spawned utter confusion among political reporters and observers alike, saying that, well, is he referring to the fact that that the NHS is a subscription service, that you pay for it, or is it becoming something that's not affordable to the ordinary person, or is it supposed to refer to the fact that the NHS is kind of outdated in its processes, which is what the review highlights in institutional adequacy and leadership, and recommends appraisals that take into account behaviour as well as achievements. But it was an odd simile to make, and it didn't really stick.
And I suppose this is part of the thing, is that as soon as politicians try and sound as if they're sort of down with the kids or understand what on earth is going on, as opposed to just... I mean, I'd rather hear from somebody who says, look, the NHS is a really great institution and there are pockets of brilliance. There are fantastic areas where, of course, their research is groundbreaking and world-leading and, this idea of healthcare and everything else. However, we've now had this sort of 2 years of pandemic dealing and clapping that it's now become this combination between this organisation that you cannot criticise for fear of, it's the most amazing thing in the world and nobody dare admit that there's something wrong with it. Like it's a religion. And the second point is that it has become an albatross. And it's become an albatross because it's becoming so expensive that we can't actually afford to either pay for it or keep it up. And there are too many people in there doing things that we don't need them to do. When is somebody going to take a hatchet to it to say, this is what it needs to do, this is how we fix it, and these are the problems? And also, I would listen to more frontline nurses and doctors and really get their input and advice from the people who actually do the job. It's a little bit like we've allowed our supermarkets to become so powerful, they are but the distributor. And instead of saying to the farmers, the people who grow the stuff, make the stuff, the manufacturers of our food products, actually let's come and talk to you. We need to disintermediate, which means take apart. We need to move away from the people who say stuff to the people who do stuff. And if we move away from this, from that, well, I think we'll be in a good place. But look, I'm just rambling. So has Sajid Javid got to reset his messaging so that we understand his direction of travel?
Yes, no, completely. And I think this is what has been stated. There was also a piece in this morning's Telegraph on the fact that they're cutting back on, you know, these diversity czars within the NHS, which are just causing undue bureaucracy. And the fact that the backlog that we're having at the moment, and
my view would be, look,
cancer checks and so on.
You know, nobody wants to see anybody discriminated against. But guess what? Best person for the job, please. Can we just stop hiring people and putting people into jobs because of something other than having the right skills for the job? And if we're not getting enough people from one particular area of society, then guess what? That comes down to training and education. That's how you'll sort it. You won't do it by positive discrimination in any shape or form.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, let's talk about some people who really are out of touch. I kind of sympathise a little bit with Harry and Meghan on the basis that they came all this way. Nobody cared what they thought, said or did. Well done to the media for giving them very little airtime.
Yeah.
And also, they've flown into a little bit of a row.
Quite literally, it's they flew on a 12-seater Bombardier Global Express, which is estimated to emit 10 times more carbon per passenger than a commercial flight over the 5,000 mile distance from California to London. You know, from the Queen,
the price is
King of Woke.
Yeah, the King and Queen of Woke. I mean, the thing is that if you're going to fly on a private jet, if you've got the money, then fine, please go ahead. We live in a place where hopefully decisions are free to make, but don't lecture. And isn't that part of the problem, is that Harry has said, there's climate change and all this sort of business and the polar bears and all that stuff. It's just like, okay, that's fine, but you've got to lead by example.
Oh yeah, no, and the Royal writer Tom Quid is quoted in this piece and kind of hits it right on the spot. They tell people to look after the environment, then they don't look after themselves. It's enormously hypocritical, and it's this obsession among members of the royal family when it comes to, I mean, remember when Prince William was speaking, on last Saturday at that marvellous celebration of Her Majesty, and going on about the environment, is that no one's there to listen about your lecture about what needs to be done about climate change. I mean, it's important that it's highlighting it, but of all occasions, not when your Majesty is celebrating, your platinum jubilee, 70 years on the throne.
Look, everybody likes a bit of green stuff, except, what about the fly past? I mean, it's just like, there is something which is utterly unnecessary. If you really thought about it, do it with drones. And look, don't get me wrong, I really like a fly past, and I don't want them to stop, but then don't do the lecturing. I think you're right. Now, meanwhile, 10-year-olds, what do 2/3 of them own?
They own a mobile phone or a smartphone.
Wow.
That's compared to just a quarter back in 2015, so in the span of 7 years. A huge hike. And then also most under 13-year-olds, in fact, are also using social media, despite the provisions that are put in place.
Doesn't it just show that social media, great as it may be, it isn't being regulated properly, to the extent that if, for example, look, we've got children who are being able to use the internet for things that they shouldn't use it for, whether it's social and digital media and the things that they see and all that stuff, partly because parents perhaps aren't necessarily reining in and taking full responsibility, but neither are the social media companies. That's arguably what we should be worried about. But also, if you can go onto the internet and buy yourself vape pens and all this stuff, which kids are doing, this is really worrying. We're just not policing this stuff properly, are we?
I think what it is it's a lack of responsibility from the social media companies, and hopefully the online safety bill that is being put through Parliament will place a duty of care on social media firms to prevent children from encountering content that's harmful and inappropriate, and protecting them online. But also, it's down to the responsibility of the parents as well. I mean, if I was I think I didn't have my first phone until I was about 12, 13, and it was like a Nokia brick. Well, back in 2010 or something. So for them to have something like an iPhone,
look, back in my day, you had to ask permission to use the telephone. That's how things work. Yes. Meanwhile, this is something that you can aspire to, and I need to know about.
Yeah.
What can help us reach a ripe old age?
Optimism, which
really?
I think we need a little bit more of, frankly, given the doomer headlines that we've been seeing.
Okay, so what? So,
this morning.
I am seen generally as a glass half full sort of person. person, which I think is probably a good thing. I do quite like a bit of positivity, and I think that even though things are really difficult now and probably going to get more difficult, if you want to have a sort of gloom storm, you can. But I would actually say, you know, positivity does make you feel a lot better. So there is proof then.
There is proof. Researcher Hayami Koga saying that it achieves exceptional longevity, adds the equivalent of half a year to 4 years of life.
Okay, great.
And the impact of optimism may be comparable to that of exercise. Study of you know, over 100,000 women.
There we go. So positivity is what we're all about. Bill, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Bill is a political commentator at Reaction and also at Young Voices, and also soon to have a new job. Bill, good luck with that. I think that's it. You're going off to Scotland for the Daily Mail.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Look at that. Congratulations on your new role, and thank you so much for coming in this morning and going through the papers. Meanwhile.